Alright, this is going to be a training. It's probably going to be more than 3 to 5 minutes like originally planned, because this is a little bit more extensive training. It's not going to be super advanced. It's actually some basic workflow stuff. I got this request in the Facebook group, the Credit Money Machine Power Users group, and I wanted to create a workflow, kind of emulate something I use for some of my outsourcing clients to provide notifications to clients. It also helps map out a prolonged process. Dispute process or round by round process. Okay, so I'm going to map that out for you guys. The first thing I want to do is make sure you guys understand how to set stuff up in advance, though. Things you guys got to think about before you just go create a workflow. This being a client notification workflow, the first thing you got to do is go create your email and/or text message content, that the verbiage that you want to go out to your clients. So kind of sit down, think about, when do I want communications to go out to my clients during my dispute process, whether I'm outsourcing to expert credit systems, whether I'm doing it myself, whatever. Write that content out. Create some emails, create some text messages, whatever you want to do. That way you've got some things to plug into your workflow. You can always tweak them on the fly, but it's good to have content. The second thing you want to make sure you have set up is the different statuses. Okay, these workflows are mainly triggered based on conditions that you set, and one of the main conditions that will kind of operate right away when you're doing, that'll be triggered based on actions you're taking in the system versus day of week or how many days have passed, is going to be these statuses. Okay. Main status, secondary status. So you want to go in and set those up in advance, or at least get a good idea what statuses you're going to use. So I'll show you mine here in a second, kind of give you an idea what it looks like, and then you guys can emulate that or put your own spin on it. Alright, so let's take a quick look at my statuses here. So I've got my processing statuses set up here, and they start at number 13 to 25 or 26 here. So I've got processing new all the way down to print round. Okay, again, you got to kind of map out your process in advance, but I'm going to show you kind of what we do, and maybe you guys can emulate that. Okay, so let's go into the workflow area and let's build this workflow. So first thing we do is click the button here to add a new workflow, and we'll name this client client notifications. Alright, so this is a brand new workflow. First step is already selected here. I like to kind of put a 1 in here just so it feels like it's a real step. I'll give it a description. I'm going to make this a text message notification to the client. So I'm going to say SMS, and I won't bore you guys with my typing. Alright, so there's my description. Gives me a pretty clear idea what's going on here. Action type is going to be SMS. Okay, and then I'm going to select from my templates. The way I did that is just clicked in the box here. So once I've selected my type, click in the box, it's now going to come up with all my templates, emails, etc. Okay, what I'm going to do is say challenges sent on your behalf round 1. That's the template that I've created. It kind of matches up with what my description is. And I'm going to have that trigger at day 0. The reason I'm going to do that is I don't care what day it triggers, because it's not going to go out until it meets the conditions I set up down here in this area here. And the condition is going to be, I want the secondary status to be round 1 sent. Okay, and we'll put this little number of seconds before sending SMS messages. It's good to just put a little 5 or 10 second gap there. It just helps the system so it doesn't overload or whatever. So I just put a little 5-second gap there. What I did was say, look, when my secondary status is round 1 sent, that's the only time that this text message will go out. That's the only time this step is going to get triggered. Okay, now time and by agent really doesn't matter, because the way this system works is the agent will matter when it comes to emails, because there's going to be tags inside the email that is going to say, it came from this person, whatever. The text messages aren't necessarily personalized. You can personalize them a little bit like you do an email. But the way these workflows work is if this is left blank, whoever the person that assigns the workflow or that is the agent assigned to that contact when the workflow triggers, the system will automatically fill in the agent's name automatically. If you want this message to always come from the same person, you can certainly assign a person, and now that's going to be static, meaning it's always going to come from Chad Smith. So blank, okay, blank means dynamic, it'll fill it in automatically. Putting an agent in there means static, it's going to always come from that person. So we'll make this one come from me all the time, no big deal. All right, let's go ahead to step 2. So we'll just click there again, hit add a step, again repeat the process. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create what I call a status change step. A step that's going to clear the workflow if this client gets canceled for some reason, whatever the case. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my description here. Okay, I'm going to make this a note because I want it to document what I'm about to do. Okay, and then in my note area here, I'm going to put in what the note's going to say on that contact record when and if this step is triggered. So if you notice here, I have workflow unassigned due to client cancellation or file completion. So what this is doing is just, putting that, hey, if the client cancels, if we go cancel the client, I want it to stop the workflow. There's no reason for it to continue, right? So I'm going to put that step in. I'm going to keep it at day 0 again, okay, because I don't want it to be based on the amount of time that's passed. I want it to just be simply triggered based on actions down here or conditions that are met down here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go pick the statuses, and this, you notice it says trigger when main status is one of these statuses. It means you can actually select more than one. So the ones I have in here that would say, hey, this has been completed or canceled would be complete. Whoops. So I'm going to select multiple ones, I'm going to hold the control button on my keyboard and hit complete, canceled, and final update complete are the 3 statuses I want. Any one of those 3 is going to trigger this step and basically stop the workflow or turn it off. Now once I've selected those 3 by holding down the control button on my keyboard and then clicking the ones I want, I'm going to hit the enter button to add those. Okay, and now once I hover here, you'll see all 3 of those are listed in that status: complete, canceled, final update complete. Those are the 3 statuses I want to be the trigger point for this step. Okay, so what this step is doing is it's going to add a note saying workflow unassigned due to client cancellation or file completion. Cool. Now I didn't put the additional action down here of clearing the workflow because of the way these workflows are set up, the order in which they process information. So I'm putting the note first. The next step is going to be the step that actually changes or turns off the workflow. So what I'll do here is I'll just duplicate this step by hitting this little green circle in the add thing. So I'll hit that, and I'm going to say steps. Don't want to spread the dates. No, we'll keep it simple, right? But now what I'm going to do is I'll change this to history. I want to put this in the history. I don't need another note, but I will put that same information in the history. So it's kind of duplicating what's going on here. We'll also put this at 0 days, right? And now I'm going to go down and I'm going to put the actual additional action that's going to take place, which is going to be to clear workflow. See that? So I'm going to clear the RD1 client notifications. I'm going to have it clear this workflow if those conditions are met. That's what I'm doing. Okay, and we'll change this to step 3 so they're, in order. We'll add another step. Okay, this one's going to be another status change, but it's going to be not to wipe out the workflow. It's going to be to actually perform another action, which is I want it to change the status to update and hold, because that's the process that we're using in this case. Okay, so I'll explain later. I'll walk you through the process. So again, I'm adding my note here, what's actually going to be placed on the contact record as a note. And what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to again put it at 0 days, because again, these are all not based on the amount of time that passes, but simply whether or not an action has been taken place. So now I'm going to go down and I'm going to say, all right, I want this triggered when the status is creditors 5 sent. Okay. What do I want to happen when the status, when it meets that criteria? I want you to change the primary status to update and hold. Okay. So what it's doing is it's saying, all right, when the secondary status gets changed to creditors 5 sent, change the main status to update and hold. It'll also add this note, right? Creditor letters sent, status changed, update, hold. So it's documenting these steps. Kind of a nice little way of doing things so you can visually see where this person's at in your process. All right, let's build the next step here. This one's going to be an agent reminder. So this is going to, I use this for my CSOs. We're outsourcing to send them a notification. This is a workflow that's designed for you guys that are doing hybrids or pay-per-deletes, where you're wanting to invoice the client after you get results before you send out another round. Okay, so this is going to be an email. We're going to select the email, and it is going to be reminder to invoice original credit or client name. So that's what's going to go out. It's going to be an email that's going to go to the agent when a certain action happens, which I'm going to show you next. This one, we're actually going to put the agent's name in there. So let's say George is the agent. Okay. And now to make sure it goes to George, not from George, we're going to check this box, which when I hover, it says if checked, then means that email or this SMS will go to the agent listed instead of the contact. So I'm going to check that box. Okay. Now again, if this was blank, where the system would fill in who the agent is and then send the notification to that agent. Okay. What I'm doing here is I'm actually sending a notification to the companies that outsource to me that we completed the update. We've went in and marked what's been fixed or deleted. So now this is sending a notification to George. I'm pretending that's my CSO in this case, or my agent if they're an in-house person, saying, hey, this person's been updated. There's results to go look at and possibly invoice the client. So the email's a reminder to invoice that client, right? Pretty cool. Now that's going to be triggered again when I go down here when my status is update complete. So my processors process the file, go mark what's fixed, what's deleted, etc., etc., and we change the status to update complete. That triggers this step, which sends a notification to George here saying, hey, update complete, go invoice your client. Okay, pretty standard, pretty easy. Now this could be easily not be an email. It could also be, it could be a text message, whatever you want it to be. You just change the type, put the template in. Okay, now the next step I'm going to do here is what I call my loop. Okay, my loop is where I'm going to move from one workflow to another, or let's say I'm going to restart this exact same workflow because maybe my round 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are exactly the same. The templates are the same, so I'm just going to just loop the thing over and over and over again. I don't do it that way. I set up a different workflow for each round, even though they're very similar, because I like it to be nice and clean. I like to see what workflow they're in. So we're going to add a final step to this little workflow. We're going to call this my workflow change. So that's what I'm going to do, is call it workflow change. Okay, and we're going to make this step the type, action type. We're going to put this information into the history of the contact. I could certainly make it a note as well, either one. And we're going to go with workflow changed to client notifications round 2, RD2. Okay. And what's going to trigger this workflow is the secondary status being changed to RD2 sent, or round 2 sent. So let's kind of walk through this real quick, and then I'll show you guys a little sample of it. Okay. Got a client, okay, brand new client. We process the file, send out the first round of disputes. My processors, or your in-house processors if you're doing it yourself, change the secondary status to RD1 sent. That triggers this text message out to the client saying, hey, we sent challenges on your behalf for round 1. Make sure to look for responses in your mailbox in the next 25 to 30 days, blah, 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 whatever you want it to say. Okay, so that happens based on that status. The next step, again, 0 days, because we don't care what time passes. It's all based on triggers here. These are kind of if this happens, if the client is canceled, they don't pay, whatever statuses I want to put in here, I've got listed here. If any one of those three statuses is active, or the client's record is changed to that status, one of those statuses, it's going to trigger this step, okay, which is going to add this note that says workflow unassigned due to client cancellation, blah blah blah. And it's also going to trigger this step, which actually adds the exact same message to the history on the client record, but also clears the workflow. So it's going to wipe out all these steps. It's going to go, all right, clear it, done. They've canceled, they're complete, whatever. No reason to continue these other steps in the workflow, right? So those, a lot of times, are not going to be triggered. They're there in case of an early cancellation, whatever. This next step is going to go out when creditor letters go out. So this workflow is based on a pay-per-delete model, where also, 5 days after the bureau letters go out, 7 days, 10 days, whatever, we send out some creditor letters. Okay, so my processors send out letters at day 5, let's call it creditors 5. That's why we have that code in there. When we do that, we change the status to creditors 5, and guess what? It adds this note, and it changes the status to update and hold. Okay, I'll tell you why that happens in a second. Update and hold means do an update. So go in and do the comparison with the credit report, mark what's fixed, what's deleted, all that good stuff, but don't send out a new round until further notice. So hold off on sending out the next round. What that's doing is giving my CSO, the company outsourcing to us, or my in-house staff a chance to contact the client or send them an invoice, collect money, whatever our process is, before sending out the next round. Okay? When the client is invoiced, we're ready to go forward, we actually have the CSO change the status to print round. Now, there's no reason to have that as a step in the workflow, because my processing manager logs in, or managers log in every day and look for stuff in print round to print. So they go in and go, oh, there's 15 letters to print. So we just pull up a report real quick and print those letters. So we don't have that inside the workflow. Okay. Then the last step here is put in place to actually move this client from round 1 client notifications into round 2 notifications. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to set up a second workflow that works hand in hand with the current one, which is what I call my Creditor SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. This is going to be one that's going to help remind your processors, or mine, to send out the creditor letters at day 5, day 10, whatever your process is. You can use this any way you want. So we're going to add another workflow real quick. We're going to call this Creditor SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. Now I'm going to throw the steps in here pretty quick this time, because I think you guys get kind of the process here. So I'm not going to waste too much time kind of explaining every step. I'll give you a little overview once I've added the workflow in here manually, okay? Okay, so we've got our Creditor SOP workflow here, okay? So I'm going to kind of walk you through this, then we'll tie it into a client, and I'll walk you through exactly how it works step by step. All right, so what I've got is my first 2 steps here are the clear the workflow process, right? So I've got a note that gets added, Creditor SOP cleared due to status change. Those status changes are down here, complete, canceled, final update, complete. Again, I don't want these steps going out if the client's canceled or we've completed the file, whatever. So I add a note. Okay, remember the note is triggered by any one of these 3 statuses I put in here. And then I add a duplicate of that, exact same thing, but this time it's going to go in the history, and then what it's going to do, it's going to clear the current workflow. Okay, I do it in 2 steps just because of the order in which this system goes and searches and finds stuff. You have to do it in this manner to clear a workflow. The only time you have to do it like this is when you're clearing a workflow or steps or whatever. Okay, so that's the only time you have to do the 2-step little move here. Then what's happening is when my processors, okay, put the secondary status into creditors 5 cent, it's going to change. I had to make a quick correction. So, all right. So then what's going to happen is, okay, this step here, you notice I have 5 days in here. Why do I have it set up that way? Well, my little SOP here is after round 1 letters are sent, if you notice down here, my little trigger, right, is RD1 sent. 5 days after the first round goes out, there's the 5 days, we want to send out a round of creditor letters. So that's why the 5 is in there. So it's going to say, hey, once the status, the secondary status goes to RD1 sent, wait 5 days, then, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to change the main status to creditors due. Okay? Again, what my staff does and what your staff could do is log in every day and just run their little report in the morning and say, all right, do we have anybody in creditor due status? Creditors due. Yep, we sure do. Let's send out creditor letters for those clients. Okay, very simple. So that's what this step is doing, is saying wait 5 days, then change the status so that I've got my nice little flow going here. The step right after that, 0 days passed. 0 days later, when the status changes to creditors 5 cent, so my processors have now sent the creditor letters, send a notification to the client saying, hey, your 5-day creditor letters have been sent. Okay? Same thing here. Now what we've done here is our SOP says in round 3 of our dispute process, we send out a different set of creditor letters, a different message to the creditors or whatever, and that is 10 days, right, after round 3 bureau letters go out. So RD3 go sent, 10 days later, trigger this note and change the main status to creditors due, wherever that is, right there. Okay? Okay, then 0 days later, right? So don't let any time pass after the status gets changed to creditors 10 cent. Once it changes that status, send out notification saying your letters went out. Your creditor letters went out. All right, let's go apply these 2 workflows to an actual fake client here. Okay, we've got John Test. We're going to go ahead and apply these workflows. So first we're going to go add them. Okay, so we're going to put them into RD1 client notifications. Just check the box. We can also hit the I for insert button. And we're also going to put him into the creditor SOP workflow. So these guys are going to be working simultaneously. What's nice is I can click the go button to the right of any one of these workflows and see what the steps are. Okay, there they are with the date on when they're expected to go out, if they're triggered. Okay, so I've got my client in the workflows. Now for this session, I'm going to trigger these things manually once I've put them into their appropriate statuses. Okay, so the first thing we need to do, if we go look at our workflow and imagining a brand new client coming in, okay, is this is going to be triggered when RD1 is sent. Okay, let's put our little workflow here up in 10 minutes. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and trigger our guy. We're going to say he's processing active because my processor sent out a round, so he's actively being processed. And then we're going to put him into RD1 sent. Okay, so I'm going to just trigger this manually. The system will trigger it automatically. I've got a 10-minute delay set up, so I'm just going to trigger it now. This would happen automatically in a normal circumstance. And you'll see what it does when I do it manually. It's not going to do this, if you've got 100 clients, you don't want to go trigger them manually and see this. But you're going to see right here, it shows this step was completed. That's why it's checked, right? So this step right here, RD1 sent, text message went out to the client. That's why that step is completed. Nothing else in this workflow has been completed yet because those criteria haven't been met. Okay? Perfect. So we sent out round 1. Now remember, the client's also in the creditor SOP. So 5 days from today, according to the creditor SOP, it should change the status. If we go look at the creditor SOP workflow, okay, it should change the status to creditors due, right? So we're going to go ahead and simulate that, pretend that's what happened. So 5 days have passed, okay? And I'm going to mark this step as complete so we can just kind of follow the flow of this thing. And it also sent out the notification to the client. We're going to pretend 5 days have passed. Okay. So here's what it would have done. RD1 sent. It would have changed the status to update and hold, right? So let's go look at the workflow. Now remember, this is all happening automatically. Okay. This update and hold status, oh, here, I'm doing it manual, I'm getting ahead. So let's actually let it do what it's supposed to do. Let's keep it processing active. I want you guys to see this happen. So my processor sent out the round of creditor letters because we're pretending 5 days went by. That triggered the 2 steps in the Creditor SOP workflow. Okay. Now, because this has been set up, when I go trigger the client notifications workflow, again, let's go look at it real quick. See that? Creditors 5 sent. It's going to change the status to update and hold. Okay. So I could wait 10 minutes and let this thing trigger, or I can just do it quick. So for our purposes, which is what I'm going to do, I'm just going to trigger it automatically. And here we go. Trigger. Okay. You can now see, again, what steps been of the remaining steps. It's showing us what it did. Okay. So now the status, when I go back to the client, should be changed to update and hold. Voila, update and hold. Okay, perfect. Now what happens is when the round due date comes due, okay, when it says 0 days remaining in the round or it goes negative, that triggers my processing staff or the processing staff, assuming you guys are doing your own processing, to go process the next round of disputes for this client. Okay, they're going to do the update, go mark stuff as fixed, go mark stuff as deleted, and they're now going to change the status to update complete. Okay, now what does that trigger? Well, that triggers an email to the agent right here. See that? Saying, hey, go invoice your client. We've done the update. Okay, so let's do that. We'll trigger this manually so we don't have to wait for the 10-minute delay I've got built into the software. And boom. Again, it's showing me here exactly what step was triggered. Bam. Email went out to the agent saying, update complete, go do your invoice. Pretty slick, okay? Now, based on our workflow, right? Based on our little workflow here, what's left? You see the steps that are left. Those are the status changes for complete. This is the status that says change the workflow to round 2, which I should have put set workflow round 2 notifications, but I didn't create that workflow. So what this would do here is automatically, once we've sent round 2, okay, once my processor says round 2 sent, it's going to move this workflow or this client into the next workflow, which I would have here. So let's just go make that adjustment so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so I went and replicated it, made an RD2 notifications workflow. We're going to go into the original one here and make sure that I have this actually setting the the next workflow. Okay, so here's what I'm doing. This says workflow change, history, workflow change to client notifications RD2, right? So what I'm saying is, okay, when the status, the secondary status is changed to RD2 sent, set the new workflow or add this client to the workflow RD2 client notifications, okay? And that's in my first round workflow. I go look at my round 2 workflow, okay? Same exact thing, okay, except it's based on based on stuff happening that would happen in the second round, like the creditors 10 sent, okay, because that's the 10-day one that we do in round 2 or round 3 or whatever, okay, and then we would just repeat the process. So all right, now that we've got that set, let's go back and take a look at it. Okay, so we're in update complete, just to take you back where we left off before I made those changes to the workflow to make it right. is the processors updated the file. The workflow sent out an email notification or a text message notification to the agent or whoever you want in your company to receive that text message or that email saying, hey, go invoice the client. Okay? When the client gets invoiced, my processors go in and change the status to print round. That's saying, okay, we did the update. Now the only thing left is to print the next round, right? So we do that. We print the round, change the status to processing active, and we change the secondary status to RD2 sent. Okay? RD2 sent is going to now trigger this workflow. If we go look at it, and I'm just going back and forth to kind of show you guys what's happening. When it says when secondary status is RD2 sent, then set the next workflow. Put it into RD2 client notification. So we're moving into the next round of the next process. Okay, so let's trigger that. Right now we can see we're only in RD1 client notifications and Creditor SOP. We're not in the RD2 client notifications, right? We're not in that. Let's trigger this, and you'll see that step again. Okay, that step was completed. That's why it's checked. And what should have happened is it should have set the next workflow for this client. So let's go look at that. Open it up. Boom, there it is. It's assigned to the round 2 workflow, and now we begin again. Okay, here we go again. And that's a pretty straightforward process. You can repeat that for as many rounds as you want to. The cool part of what I just did is I created separate workflows and then linked them together or strung them together and put some if this happens then do this type of methodology into it, but kept it simple. And I also set up 2 workflows that work side by side. The reason I do that with the creditor stuff versus putting it all into one workflow is because you may have some clients you don't want in to do creditor letters for. So you wouldn't add them to the Creditor SOP workflow, right? There's no creditor letters that are ever going to go out for that client. Maybe I'm offering 2 levels of service. Whatever the case, that's why I like the flexibility of creating them in separate workflows like that. It gives me the ability to say, I want this client to have creditor letters sent out. I don't want this one to have creditor letters sent out. Hopefully that kind of gives you guys a good breakdown of how to set up a workflow. I think that was pretty detailed, and shoot me questions if you guys have questions. Understand I also do build workflows for companies. I'm very reasonable in cost. I also do consulting on Credit Money Machine. I do business consulting for the credit repair industry, sales consulting, all that good stuff. So give me a ring, shoot me a message on Facebook if you got questions, or if you'd like me to help you out in more detail on some of this stuff for your business.